Life for a midwife in 14th-century Anjou was a world of urgent footsteps on frozen lanes, whispered prayers in darkened rooms, and a single unshakable rule: mother and child must live. This story brings you into the flicker-lit cottage where that vow is kept, where tools are simple, stakes are absolute, and every breath feels counted. Now, let's step into that warm room in Anjou, where the birthing stool waits by the hearth and the night's work begins. The birthing stool waits by the hearth when the pounding starts on your door. Wood legs scuff the rushes where you left them after the last long night. A clay cup dries beside it with a rim of herbs staining the lip. The room is close and warm and ready in the way you keep it. Your hand finds the latch before the pounding comes again. Knuckles thud through the timber and rattle the iron bar. Your heart tightens once, then loosens into the practiced rhythm of work. You breathe and lift the bar and open to the lane. Cold air threads the gap and carries the runner's breath. He's a mill boy, shoulders damp, hair stuck down with river mist. His eyes jump over your table, your basket, your stool, counting what he cannot name. He stammers out the miller's name and the word for trouble. A quick count of risks steadies your mind. Distance to the stream crossing, the steep lane at the orchard, the turn by the wedge of limestone and the cart ruts that never dry. You picture the miller's wife on her bed and the way she bows over pain. You speak the plain goal in your head because the night needs one clear line. Mother and child must live. If they do not, your craft is questioned, your hands are doubted. Your name is carried to the chapter house. The boy shifts from foot to foot and waits for your answer that you have already given yourself. Basket first. Linen folded and counted. Cord and knife in a wrapped roll. A small jar of oil, the colour of pressed seed. 2 strips of clean cloth to bind your hair. You set the birthing stool nearer the door and test the pegs that hold its crossbar. A sprig of rue above the lintel is said to turn ill looks when smoke clings and tallow softens. Lift the rue sprig and press it flat in your pouch. The boy's gaze follows your hands as if there were power in the simple act of touching things in a certain order. You nod to the table and he grabs the basket like a man given rank. In these parts, the call goes by foot through dark lanes. Clerks note midwives' oaths in episcopal registers in 14th century Anjou. Parish custom expects neighbours to rouse whoever keeps the stool and waters. The mill sits at the stream, and births stay in houses unless danger grows too plain. Your shoulders carry the winter cloak and the weight settles steady. You wedge the door with a stone to leave a line of warmth for your return. The boy runs ahead as if speed were the only medicine. You follow, feet sure on the familiar pits and humps that years have taught you. Frogs call where the ditch widens near the orchard. The path narrows between hazel roots and broken flint. Your basket thumps against the boy's back with each short step. You judge the time it will take to reach her by the length of your breath and the number of heartbeats between patches of mud. At the stream the mill wheel murmurs like a hand working grain. Spray pearls the boy's hair and spots your cloak. You taste iron on the air and think of blood and the tricks it plays on fear. You fix your jaw and keep walking. Once inside the mill yard, you pass under a leaning beam with roped sacks tied high against damp. Dogs rise and settle when they catch your scent. The miller, thick-necked and grey, waits by the door with both hands forced flat against his thighs. His mouth works and fails at words and then he steps aside. Up the narrow stair the smell changes. Warm bread, wet cloth, sour milk, and that sharp note that speaks of effort and time. A small lamp winks on a low shelf and throws a patient glow over the plaster. The room knocks once with a sound from the bed and then quiets again. You set your basket on the floorboards and the boy drops to the threshold. The miller's wife lies drawn in and pale but ready to meet your eye. Her sister keeps a hand at her shoulder and a damp cloth in the other. Your voice finds the even pace that rooms like this require. You ask the small questions first and listen to the rhythm beneath the answers. How long? How close? Where it sits? What helps and what sharpens? The sister lifts the kettle and its handle clicks against the hook. You look to the stool and to the space beside the bed and map your steps. The tool roll opens with a small sigh of leather. The knife flashes once as you check the edge. Cord coils lie in their place. Linen lies ready for what must be caught and warmed. You count again because numbers make calm. A coin warmed near a tallow flame sits ready on the table edge. Press the coin flat against the wood and set it aside where the lamp can find it later. You do not argue with customs when they do no harm. You keep only what steadies hands and hearts. The miller hovers and then remembers his pace outside will help more than his shadow here. His boots scrape the stair and fade into the wheel's slow voice. The room holds the order you brought. The mother's breath takes your counting and borrows it. Blankets fold back. Linen slips under knees. Your palm tests heat at brow and chest. You talk of small, ordinary things because pain listens and steals strength and is sometimes soothed by the picture of bread baked right or a wheel cleaned of chaff. You catch the sister's eye and tilt your chin toward the ewer. Work has begun whether you wish it or not. You've said yes to the night and to whatever it contains. Your name will ride home with the boy either way, and there will be talk at the market and perhaps a quiet word at the vestry door next week. The only measure that matters now is breath. Near midnight, the tallow candle throws a steady glow over the threshold. Warm clay steadies your fingers as you slide the wick near the stool. A small twist of char makes the flame take quick and low. The clay saucer warms your fingers as you slide it nearer the stool's legs. Light steadies the room and gives edges to what you must choose. Your fingers test the cord roll first. Knots sit even and tight along the braid. The knife's edge whispers against your thumbnail and answers clean. A length of cloth wraps the blade and binds it flat. Outside the lane coughs once and shuffles. A cart creaks somewhere past the hedge and then stills. The runner's breath scratches the boards again. Lighter now. Almost a question. You keep the rhythm of your work because steady hands quiet fear. A thought gathers and holds like a pin at your cuff. Oath before charm, care before word, water before fear. You let the saying move through your chest and settle, and then you reach for the ewer. The brass lip bumps the bucket as you dip, and heat lines the handle. Steam lifts from the bowl and fogs a corner of the polished surface. You fold a cloth and lay it along the rim to warm. Your palm checks the warmth the way you always do, quick and sure, by the table. Your pouch waits with a narrow strap and a simple clasp. A twist of salt sits in a scrap of linen tied with thread. Blessed last month. The grains clack against each other with a dry music. The rue you pressed into the pouch keeps its bitter breath. A length of ribbon rests coiled on the chest rail, its prayer knots counted and plain. You turn it once in your hand, then wind it soft and set it by the cloths. No charms that bind or burn, no marks that promise more than human hands can deliver. You keep only what calms a room and harms no one. Near the door, a small board bears a smudged image of a saint and a child. The wood is cracked from years of damp and drying. You pass your wrist under it and judge the space by habit. The runner shifts his weight as though the board itself had answered him. In Anjou, midwives swear before a parish priest to keep mothers from danger and to baptize a failing child if no cleric can be found. Oaths name simples and ban spells, and the priest notes the village that holds your stool. A dull nib scrapes the consistory act book's edge when midwives renew oaths. Afterwards, the women go back to their lanes with water flasks and cloths. You set the water jar in your basket and wedge it with towels so it will not tip. The ampulla for emergency water knocks softly against the jar, a quick hollow sound. Your thumb presses the stopper until it sits sure. The roll of linen fills the space beside it like a second. Breathe in presence. Bread waits on the board. Yesterday's loaf with its crust thinned to softness. You tear 2 bites and swallow them with a mouthful of small beer. Food tucks your stomach back under your ribs. Strength likes plain fare on nights like this. Your cloak hangs where it dries best, over the stool, within the lamp's small reach. The wool holds heat, and the hem drags a little where the last lane left grit. You shake it once. Careful of sparks. Your shoulders feel the weight, and your ribs loosen under it, heard through the door. A woman cries out and then breathes down to a rough hum. You close your eyes and match your breath to that far rhythm for 3 counts. The boy takes that as permission and checks his grip on the basket. You nod. Your hand pauses over the little pot of oil. Pressed seed and clean, its scent is faint and good. You loosen the lid and touch a knuckle to the surface. It will move easily in a cold room. You slide it into the pouch where the roux sits. The stool you use in other houses leans against the wall, legs scarred by travel and flaws. You rub a thumb along a splintered peg and feel the grain rise. You choose to leave it. The miller's cottage will have a bed, and there is narrow space for bodies to work. Your roll holds a strap to steady knees if needed. A folded square of linen bears a stain from a previous night that never yielded to washing. You count the layers away from it and tie a knot to mark the clean top. Counting makes calm travel along your forearms. The boy watches the knot form as if it sealed more than cloth. Your mind moves down a list you trust. Water set, cloths counted, knife wrapped, thread coiled, salt tucked, oil ready, ribbon placed, ampulla sealed, basket cushioned, cloak on. You leave space in your head for what cannot be named until you meet it. In the lane, a neighbour clears his throat as if to announce himself and then thinks better of it. The runner glances from your face to the door and back. You speak a simple instruction for him to walk ahead until the orchard and then slow. He nods as if he'd been given a secret. A strip of linen binds your hair at the nape. Tight enough to stay, not enough to ache. The sound of the knot pulling through calms you. A familiar tug. Your hands wash in the warmed water. You dry them on the cloth you keep only for your own skin. The lamp breathes a small sound when you turn the pin to shorten the wick. Flame draws down and steadies. You set the saucer wide of the basket so the heat will not nick the rope handle. You lift the basket and let it find its place against your palm. For a moment you look at the table and take the measure of what remains. A spool of thread sits behind the mug. The saintboard keeps its cracked smile. The ash in the hearth pushes a faint grey sigh at the iron bar. It is a room prepared for return. Your shoulders square, and the latch gives under your hand. The boy shifts aside with the careful pride of someone trusted with a burden. He steps into the lane and keeps the pace you named. Your foot crosses the threshold with the thought that choices are a kind of warmth. At the hearth, the smell of smoke follows as the door eases shut. The straw mattress drinks in the hearth smoke as you step through the doorway. The ticking shifts under the miller's wife when a pang takes her by the spine. Chaff whispers in the seams where someone stitched last harvest's gleanings into the sack. Your palm skims the edge to feel if the fill lies even. Your hands move the stool aside and make room for knees. Fingers slide the clean linen into place beneath her hips. Breath comes in a tight climb and a hard fall. You match it aloud with a calm count and let the room take your pace. The low ceiling pushes heat down towards shoulders and hands. Plaster shows hairline cracks that spider from the beam. A thin map of winters. A clay cup on the sill holds water gone cool and clear. The lamp keeps a small, steady glow from the shelf by the door. You think about order and choice and the single measure that stays the same mother and child must live. That line makes the rest small enough to carry. You let it anchor your next tasks. The sister nods when your eyes meet hers. The woman's thigh trembles under your palm, and you steady it with a strap against the sheet. Her breath flares, then levels when you say to ride the wave down instead of pushing against it. Knuckles whiten and loosen. The mattress rustles like light rain against a shutter. A folded cloth cools her brow. Salt lines the rim where the last wiping dried. The miller shifts his weight near the stair and remembers to stay outside the circle of women. You send him for fresh water with a tilt of your chin, and his boots retreat. Neighbours mutter that a twist of salt tucked beneath a straw seam keeps pain from snagging when smoke hangs and water cools. Press the mattress seam and check the stitch where the ticking puckers along the edge. The seam holds, and your thumb tastes the grit of old chaff. Your hand warms oil between thumb and first finger. The other hand cups the curve low across her belly to feel the child's lie. The head should fit the basin of the pelvis. The shoulder should not catch. You mark the tilt by the line your palm makes from hip to hip. Her breath hitches on the peak and she swallows a cry into her teeth. The sister tightens her grip on the cloth and hums a line she learned in childhood. The lamp flame lifts and settles when a draught tests the wick. Sweat beads near the hairline and cools in a fine sheen. A thin square of linen goes over your wrist, always the same thickness so your touch reads true. You ask her to breathe low and slow, to let the pull move through her instead of against her. The word steady rides between the beats like a plank across water. Near the door the basket holds its small order cord. Knife, towels, ribbon, jar. The ampulla knocks once against the jar when someone brushes the handle. Your ear measures the intervals between surges by the clink of brass at the ewer. You build a quiet map of minutes. In these cottages, the room for birth is the room for bread, spinning, and sleep. Women move together like a loom. Clerks note emergency baptisms in episcopal registers with the midwife's name. After such lines, the book returns to marriages and dues and the year's weather. You ease the mother to her side to turn a stubborn angle. Knees draw up. A cushion goes between them to keep the hips open. Your fingers trace along the lower back until the muscles unclench. The sister asks how long until the child is ready to crown. You tell her you'll know by the breath, the sound, and the give under your hand. The answer is simple and true, and it saves her from counting the unknowable. She settles by the foot of the bed and keeps the cloth moving. The miller brings water and tries to pass it through the narrow space between knee and stool. You take the handle and set the ewer on the floorboards, where you can reach it without bending far. He looks toward his wife and then turns his face away, learning again where he should stand. Your own breath steadies your arms. You talk of flour kept dry and sacks lifted high from damp, of how the wheel sings when the race runs clean. Small talk builds a bridge across each climb. The woman lets her shoulders sink a thumb's width lower. The mattress seeds a little with each swell. Straw shifts into hollows that want filling. The ticking seam remains true, a line of order under the disorder of pain. Heat pools between palm and skin and makes the oil carry better. You set your hand and judge the child's position again, slow and certain. The crown feels forward, not brim first, with the fontanelle low. The shoulder that wanted to catch begins to slip to the safer side. You keep your voice level to guide breath to follow. A clean cloth goes under the hips when you sense a change in the way the lower back softens. The sister folds another square and stands ready. You lift the knee strap and shift the angle a finger's breadth. The mother rides the wave with a low sound that smooths at the end. Small sounds rule the room, the click of the ewer against the basin, the faint hiss from the wick after its brief test by a draught, the slur of linen when you turn a fold, the sigh a woman makes when someone holds her hand without words. Once, when wind rattled the shutters and hail beat the thatch, you saw panic defeat a labour that should have gone easy. You learned then to be the weight that does not move. That is your work as much as hands and tools. The line stays the same, mother and child must live. A little bread and beer ready on the table makes the room feel safe. The sister's stomach answers and she smiles, ashamed and relieved. You press the crust into her hand and tell her to keep her strength. She chews and laughs at herself in a whisper. Your hands sink deeper at the next swell and meet a firm roundness lowering as it should. The mother's breath changes, less ragged, more grounded. The skin along your own forearms prickles with a clean heat that means the end may be near. You do not say it aloud, you keep the pace steady. The floorboards take your weight when you lean in to counter the child's turn. Your shoulder stays soft and your wrist does the work. The straw scent rises, dry and mild. The lamp's glow marks the edge of the bed where linen will matter most. A last check cord ready, blade wrapped, oil to hand, cloths within reach. The sister repeats your count under her breath, making it her own. The miller keeps to the stair like a sentry told his post. The house holds. You smooth the linen sheet until it lies flat, cool under your knuckles. The brass ewer nudges the linen sheet when you draw it closer with your foot. Steam beads along its lip and slicks the handle. A faint ring prints on the board where you rested it a moment too long. Heat rises in a soft twist you can read with the back of your wrist. Your palm steadies on the mother's hip as the neck swell builds. Breath climbs, holds, and drains. You time its fall by the count your chest keeps without thinking. Fingers flatten along the lower belly to feel the child's lie against bone. A shoulder wants to wedge again. The angle tells you which way the small back faces. You slide 2 fingers to the side where there is room and ask for a slow breath. The mother obeys with a low hum that rides the wave down. The husband wears a path at the head of the stair. Boots scrape and still and scrape again. He looks into the room, then back to the landing, learning how to be useful by not entering. His hands work against each other, slow and helpless, as if grinding grain without a mill. You turn the mother gently to her other side. The knee strap eases the thigh into place. A folded cloth props the belly so weight rests where it helps. The sheet pulls tight under your knuckles and keeps its clean line. Oil warms between your fingers and moves sure over skin. The child's head sits higher than it should for this stage, and the shoulder rides proud. You bring a palm to the sacrum and press in small circles to invite a better tilt. The body listens, grudging but listening. Small talk holds the room together. You ask the sister about the last flour sack and how the miller kept it dry through last week's rain. She answers with a small laugh that catches on her worry and then frees itself. The mother finds that laugh and lets it soften her jaw. The ewer's lid clicks against the rim when you dip the cloth. You wring it once and lay it cool across the brow. The breath at your elbow steadies for 4 beats and then breaks again. You read the change as if it were print set large on a page. Men in these lanes fetch, chop, and wait while women work berths in small rooms. Most houses hold one low chamber where bread bakes, wool dries, and children sleep. Midwives learn to measure hours not by clocks, but by the change in a woman's voice and the number of steps a husband wears into a floor. The shoulder eases little by little when the back settles toward the wide space. You keep your pressure constant, delicate despite the strength it demands. The mother's hand clamps the sheet, then loosens when you tell her to breathe down and not out. She nods and finds the track again. From the stair comes the miller's mutter to himself. He counts a thing he cannot fix. The sister puts a palm to the mother's shoulder and hums the same 2 notes she has kept through the last hour. The room holds these patterns like a loom holding warp. Your fingers confirm the change. The shoulder no longer blocks the way. The crown sits truer in the basin. You say the good news with a quiet certainty that carries more weight than loud comfort. The mother closes her eyes and lets the neck swell past with less fight. The oil carries heat cleanly now. Your thumb traces a slow half circle and your hand follows. You think of the mill race running straight, of the difference a quarter turn makes in how grain feeds the stone. That is the scale of this moment, tiny and enormous at once. Sweat beads along your own lip and you taste salt. The lamp's glow leaves a small coin of brightness on the iron bar across the hearth. The sister dips the cloth again and wrings it with hands that never shake. She's learned your pace and matches it. You adjust your stance to keep your back easy. Knees bend, weight set low, wrists soft so you do not bruise. The child responds to the room's order. The crown presses down another finger's breadth. A clean cloth waits folded on the bed's edge. Cord lies coiled like a sleeping snake in the basket. The knife sleeps in its wrap until called. You make a habit of looking once and only once to be sure each thing sits where it should. The husband stops at the landing and asks, without words, if he may step closer. You tilt your head just enough to send him back to his pacing. He understands and obeys. His boots mark the boards again in a steady measure you can use. You guide the mother onto her hands and knees for 3 waves. Hips open. Gravity helps. The sister braces the pillow to protect tender places. The shoulder that once caught now glides with a reluctant grace. You return her to her side when the count tells you to change. The strap lifts and settles. You keep a hand on the sacrum until the neck swell makes its case. There is a rhythm here, and you make sure no one breaks it. A thin sound rises from the hearth when a coal shifts under ash. The lamp does not flicker. Steam lifts from the ewer in a skein that unravels and vanishes. The mother swallows and breathes through her nose and keeps her jaw open. You feel hair under your fingers, damp and fine. The line of the skull presents as it should. The shoulder follows, no longer proud but willing. The body has agreed to the terms you set. Your mind holds the simple rule that steadies every choice. Mother and child must live. You keep the rims small enough for that to fit. All else falls away like chaff blown off a sieve. A folded corner of linen finds your wrist so touch stays true. You ease the perineum with a patient hand. The sister watches your face and takes her cue from your brow more than your words. She breathes with you, and so the mother breathes with her. When a pang bites sharper, you lower your voice and shorten your count. The wave drops quicker than it rose. The mother rides it with less noise, surprised by her own control. You nod and let that surprise feed the next breath. Steam softens the cloth you lay again across the brow. The husband's steps have found an almost musical loop on the landing. His presence helps without entering. He does not know that, but you do. You check the child's pulse with 2 light taps against the presenting scalp. Firm, quick, and sure. The shoulder's trick is past. Now patience guards more than speed. A lamp shadow trembles on the plaster and stills. The ewer's handle warms under your fingers where you left them to rest. The mother turns her face to the low window and finds the night with her eyes. Then she closes them and turns inward again, where all the useful work lives. You say that the worst of the angle is done. The sister smiles, then swallows a small sob she did not expect. You keep your tone even and return to the count. The room obeys. Outside, the church bell carries across the field in slow, even tolls. The husband stops pacing at the sound while the room holds steady silence. The rush-strewn floor holds still as the church bell thins beyond the shutter. A draught creeps under the door and brushes your ankle. Straw shifts underfoot when you change your stance. The air in the room feels heavier, waiting for a sound you want. Your hands brace the mother's hips as the neck swell rises. Shoulders ease where you guided them. Linen takes the strain and stays flat. Your thumb rests on the sacrum and reads the change in muscle. The brass ewer lifts from the board and glints near the sheet. Steam kisses your knuckles when you wet a cloth. The lamp stains the plaster with a low glow that does not waver. Cord and blade wait at the edge of sight like promises you will keep. A single rule steadies your mind. Mother and child must live. That line holds when everything else wants to scatter. You let breath follow it. The head rounds into your palm and then the shoulders follow. Weight pours forward into your hands and surprises you with its silence. The child comes, slick and pale, not taking air. Your heart tightens once. Then your training finds its path. Your palm rubs a quick circle over the small back. A warm cloth follows, firm and sure. You clear the mouth with 2 careful sweeps. The room listens for a sound that does not come. The sister's breath turns sharp in the corner of the room. The miller stops moving on the landing. You feel the small chest under your fingers, rising too little, too slow. Warmth matters now more than words. You draw the child to the hollow of your arm. The other hand lifts the ewer for a breath and dips the cloth again. Heat folds around skin and spreads. The little face holds a stillness that steals strength from the room. The mother turns her head and whispers a name without sound. Her fingers grip the sheet and then open. The sister touches her shoulder and waits for your voice. You keep your voice low and steady and ask for the ampulla. The glass knocks the basket's lip with a hollow note. Your thumb seats the stopper and then frees it. Drops bead at the mouth as if they made their own choice. You cradle the small skull in your palm and set the other hand under the neck. In these parishes, a midwife keeps water ready for danger that steals minutes, when breath will not come. Episcopal registers in Anjou permit midwives to perform emergency baptism. Some entries also note the cottage where it happened and the woman's name. The books return to marriages and dues after that brief line. You tilt the ampulla and let 3 drops fall. They find the crown and thread hair and trace the soft fontanelle. The sister gives the name again, firm and sure this time. The room holds its breath with you. live. The word leaves you, small and plain. You press the child to your chest and rub again. Fingers move from neck to spine in a steady path. You set the cloth aside and use your palm for a firmer stroke. Your breath counts the rhythm you want to hear. The miller on the landing says nothing. His boots stop scraping. The sister wipes the mother's brow and hums two thin notes. The lamp glow keeps its coin on the hearth bar. A foot kicks once against your wrist. You rub again, slower, a touch deeper. The tiny mouth opens and then closes. The chest lifts a little, enough to pull hope up with it. You lower your face and let your breath warm the child's cheek. Heat travels from your skin to that stillness. The linen towel wraps around the back and neck and keeps warmth near. Your hands do the same work you have done in other rooms, on other nights. The sister whispers the name again, a promise handed back to the room. The mother stares the window as if a star might answer. You keep your count and your pressure and your quiet. The child's chest rises again and holds. A thin sound threads the air. Hardly a cry. It sharpens the edges of the room. You rub once more to invite more breath. The sound comes again. Weaker than you like, but more than nothing. You glance at the ewer and judge its heat. Not too hot, not too cool. You dampen a corner of linen and press it along the small rib cage. Heat walks into the skin where your palm has cleared the path. The sound strengthens a little. Milk scent wanders from the mother's skin. You turn the child and lay her belly down across your forearm. The spine fits the curve your arm makes without thought. Another breath comes, shorter but truer. You glance at the sister and tell her to hold the lamp nearer, wider the cloth. She obeys and keeps her hand steady. Light washes the child's face and shows a better colour rising. Your thumb feels a steadier beat under the jaw. A moment of calm moves through the room like slack water behind a weir. You keep your hands working because calm must be earned twice. The mother's grip loosens on the sheet. Her eyes stay fixed on the small face. You bring the child to the mother's chest. Skin meets skin and shares heat. The tiny mouth searches in a blind, brave way. You guide with a finger and then pull your hand back to let them work. The miller exhales like a man who has surfaced. He stays at the landing as you asked. His boots remain still while the house listens. The sister laughs once and covers it with her hand. You check the cord with a quick glance and keep it slack and safe. Blade and tie will have their moment, but not now. Now is for heat and rhythm and breath. Your palms keep their assignments. Outside the wheel murmurs, and the stream sounds higher than before. Air moves in the low room and dries sweat along your jaw. The lamp does not flicker. The child finds a fragile cry that breaks and mends and breaks again. The mother says the name aloud this time. Her voice shakes and steadies. Her eyes find yours and hold. You answer with a nod that feels heavier than it is. You wrap a warm towel over both bodies. The sister tucks edges and keeps a hand near the small shoulders. Careful and proud. The breath in the room changes, less jagged, more true. You feel your own chest answer it. On the table, the holy water ampulla sits open and small. 2 drops cling to the lip and finally fall to the wood. You dry the mouth with the corner of your sleeve and set the stopper. The glass goes back into the basket where it belongs. For a moment the past presses at your throat, a night when water could not help, and a name was said into silence. You remember the feel of that weight in your arms. Then you return to this room, to these hands, to this breath. The sound from the child is thin but real. You ask for the wooden bowl and a little warm water. The sister brings it quick and careful. You wash the slick from the child's hair and temples. The towel drinks it away and leaves warmth. You watch colour gather along cheeks and lips. Fingers flex and then fold. The belly rises with a better rhythm. The room lets out a sigh that nobody claims. You lift the ewer to the board and keep it near the bed. The knife stays wrapped for now. The cord rests slack and safe on the sheet. The edge of the towel lies over it like a promise. Your hands shake once and stop. You let that tremor pass through and out. A crust of bread sits near the lamp, and the sister pushes it toward you. You shake your head and keep your place. The mother hums the name under her breath, tasting it. The child answers with a little sound and a rooting mouth. You steady the small head with 2 fingers. A breath, then another, then a third. Steam threads the air near the ewer and rises straight. The sister wipes the mother's brow and smiles without words. The landing stays quiet, as if even the boards understand. Work turns to watching. By the hearth, embers glow red and steady, casting small edges in clear light. The linen sheet lies smooth beneath her hips, cool under your knuckles. A faint crease near the hem shows where you folded it back in haste. You rub the line flat and check that the strap sits easy on her thigh. Edges matter most when the worst is past. Your fingers test the perineum with a gentle press. Skin speaks of a shallow tear, not deep, but needing tidy work. You ask for the lamp to come closer and for the sister to keep the cloth warm. Breath lowers in the room as if the house itself understands quiet hands. Hearth heat drifts under the table and warms your ankles. Damp wool in your hem gives up the stream's chill at last. The wheel outside murmurs, and grain scent hangs by the stair. Ash settles with a soft tick that marks the room's return to ordinary time. You think about order, stop bleeding, stitch true. Guard comfort, keep witnesses. That is the shape of safety in small rooms. The cord lies slack and white against the sheet. You slide the tie beneath, pinch, and knot clean. Your blade flashes once and then disappears back into its wrap. The end you leave is neat and short. A folded towel cushions the mother's knees. The sister holds the bowl and watches your brow more than your words. You ask the miller to draw a little fresh water and to stand where you can see him if needed. He nods and takes the steps down like a man testing ice. Oil warms in your palm, just enough to ease. Thread waits. Beeswork spun fine and strong by a neighbour 2 lanes over. You set 2 stitches with a sure hand and whisper the numbers in your head. The second sits true, the third seals the edge. The mother's breath steadies into even swells. You praise her for that plain bravery that is not loud. A cloth cools her brow and picks up salt from the skin. Her sister smiles without showing teeth. Brewers quietly claim a mouthful of warm ale with fennel seed brings milk quicker when straw crackles and a shutter works in the wind. Press the wooden bowl against the hearth bench and pour a little to warm the rim. You add only what calms a pinch, no more. The way your oath allows, foam laces the edge and falls. You let the mix stand while the lamp's glow sits steady on the iron bar. The smell is mild and kind. The child sleeps on the mother's belly, small mouth open after good work. Your palm checks the tiny chest and feels a regular lift. Fingers read the fontanelle for heat or throb. All sits as it should. Skin colour has risen from uncertain to rosy at the edge of the lips. You turn back to the stitches and set 2 more. Neat and even. Your hands keep the tiny rhythm that the room has learned to trust. The mother winces once and breathes through it. You breathe with her so the moment passes. Consistory Act books in Anjou often note who witnessed an emergency baptism in a cottage. The habit makes you list faces even as you knot thread. 2 witnesses give weight when fear roams later. The miller returns and stands where you placed him, present and quiet. The sister's name fixes itself in your mind beside the mother's, then the mill boy's, who waits at the threshold. You keep a mental tally the way you count cloths. Names are as useful as needles. Your hands rinse in the warm water and rise clean. Drops slip from your fingers and darken a small patch on the board. You dry on your own cloth and keep it apart from the linens that will later touch the child. Clean things have clear paths in this room, from the stair. A floorboard gives under the miller's heel and then holds. He asks if he should send for the priest in the morning. You say yes, for thanks and names, and he nods as if given a trade secret. Men like a rule they can carry outside. The drafters cool to comfort. You lift the bowl and tip it so the rim kisses the mother's lip. She swallows, slow and careful. A second sip follows. Her shoulders drop a finger's width. The child stirs. Rooting with a small determined turn, you guide a hand, then a breast, and let the pair find each other. Lips seal, tongue works, and the rhythm that belongs to no one but them begins. It is a simple music and does not need applause. A 3-sentence thought walks through you about the way these nights leave marks. Midwives keep a mental ledger of faces, words, and timings because questions come when rooms grow quiet. The church asks for oaths and sometimes for names. A steady answer keeps peace when rumour wants to run. You set the last stitch and cut thread clean. A smear of oil smooths the setting and wards off pull. The sister watches your hands and relaxes when she sees the small knot lie flat. The mother sighs and stares at the child as if relearning a word. The boy at the threshold shifts a foot and catches your eye. You thank him by name and tell him he did well to run. He stands taller by a thumb's breadth. Pride is a small medicine, and it works without cost. You check the bed again to eat dry under the hips, cushion where it needs to be, straps slack to spare the skin. The lamp sits a little farther from the linen now that the work is done. The ewer keeps its warmth but no longer steams. Every object rests in a gentler roll. Your throat remembers the bread you refused. The sister sees it and presses a crust into your hand with a look that offers more than food. You bite once and feel the room accept that permission. Hunger has waited its turn. Now it takes a seat without fuss. The miller's hands stop worrying one another and fall to his sides. He peers into the room and asks if he may come near. You shake your head, not unkindly, and point him to the doorpost. He leans there, learning what standing witness means. You lift the small coin you warmed earlier and set it under the pillow's corner by habit. It has no power beyond easing minds that ask for tokens. If it harms no one, you leave it in place. If it were to trouble a priest, it would quietly vanish before morning. Names pass through your head again. You say them silently as you fold cloths. Mother, sister, miller, boy. You add your own, not from pride, but to hold your share of account. Witnesses are as much for truth as for trouble. The child slips off the breast and naps with mouth slack and content. You adjust the towel to keep both bodies warm. A draught touches your wrist and warns you the fire will need banking before you go. The room has a way of talking when you attend to small things. Under the table, a stray grain of wheat cracks when you shift your heel. The wheel outside drops to a lazy murmur. The field breath beyond the shutter sounds like a low sea. Night has returned to being night. You offer the mother the last sip of the warm draught. She takes it and licks a drop from her lip with a smile she did not expect to find. The sister rubs her own neck and laughs under her breath at the noise her stomach makes. Ordinary life climbs back onto its stool. You gather your tools into the basket, count thread and cloth, and tuck the knife deep. The ampulla sits sealed and small beside the towels. You will note in your head what you used and what you must replace before the next lane brings feet to your door. Order now spares worry later. A cool thread of air slips through the shutter gap while the room settles. The holy water ampulla taps your palm as the shutter shivers under a hurried knock. Air threads the gap again, this time sharper, carrying a woman's breath and a man's thin prayer. The boy from the lane has returned with another beside him, cap in hand, eyes wide. Your hand lifts the latch and the door prints cold against your knuckles. A woman stands folded over one arm as if holding herself together. Her husband steadies her elbow and avoids your eyes. The boy names the crofter's cottage beyond the quarry and says a single word that changes weight. The lane holds a hush that is not peace. Far off. The stream works under the wheel and the miller's dog gives one uncertain bark. Frost needles the ruts where carts cut deep last week. The woman breathes short and tight. You think of the oath you swore with your hand on a plain board and a basin at your feet. You think of water kept near for danger and of words you speak only when breath fails. 2, the boy said, and your chest answers with a steadier beat. You shift your basket to the crook of your arm and turn to the sister in the bed. A touch to the mother's shoulder, a glance at the sleeping child, a nod that promises return. The miller steps aside, taught now by an hour of pacing what it means to make room. The boy takes his place at your heel and the couple follow. Stone bites through your shoe on the first bend past the orchard. Breath smokes in front of mouths and vanishes. The crofter's lane drops to all the quarry. a gash chalky and cold even by night. You keep your stride short so the woman can borrow your rhythm. At the cottage door the lintel creaks under a dry wreath of last summer's herbs. The woman's aunt waits inside with a lamp and a fear she's trying to hide. Heat is stingy here, kept low to save fuel for morning. The bed is narrow, the roof beam low enough to mark tall men. You set the ampulla on the chest rail, where the light can find it if needed. Linen comes from the basket, folded true along the grain. The strap lies ready without fuss. You guide the woman onto the bed and measure with your palm the work her body has already done. A second roundness crowds the belly in a way your hands recognize. One head sits low, another shape rides high toward the ribs. Two pulses meet your fingers in different corners, quick and not the same. The woman hears you breathe and asks with her eyes for a number. 2. The word answers the room like a bell struck once. Hands move faster now, but not hurried. You ask the husband to fetch water and to warm it, not boil it. The aunt lifts the lamp and steadies it at shoulder height. Linen slides under hips. Oil warms. The strap anchors a thigh. When danger rises in a birth, Episcopal registers in this region sometimes note an ondoye performed by a midwife when no priest can be found. Such entries sit between marriages and dues as if they were ordinary. The books name cottages and lanes, and sometimes the aunt who stood by. You raise your palm and set it low to feel the first child. The head answers, well placed, willing. The second presses along your other hand's line with a stubborn pride. You speak in a calm that makes a small island where the woman can breathe. The husband returns with a steaming bowl and forgets his own heat. You take it before his fingers learn the lesson. He steps back, chastened by pain he does not carry. The aunt places a folded cloth by your elbow without being told. You ask the mother to ride the wave and not fight the pull. Knees draw up, strap holds, breath fits the count you give. The first child lowers as it should, and you prepare to greet a second with less patience and more need. Your chest keeps the old refrain with a new word tucked into it. Mother and children must live. Oil moves easy under your hand. The lamp cuts a small circle on the plaster and finds the curve of your wrist. The aunt hums a tune with hardly 3 notes. The husband takes the doorpost as his post, learning to be useful by staying still. A swell builds and breaks and carries the first child into your hands with a gasp that is almost a cry. Warmth spills over your palms and the cloth takes it without complaint. The small face turns, colour thin but present. You rub once, clean and sure, and sound threads the air. You set the first child to the mother's chest and keep the cord slack. A towel tucks warmth around both bodies. Your other hand returns to the high roundness where the second waits. The skin under your palm tightens with a new kind of effort. The aunt asks if you should send for the priest. You tell her the church sits 2 lanes off and the road is slick. You say you have water and words if breath fails before feet can make that ground. Her chin lifts at that, braver for knowing the plan. The second child turns wrong, back to the wide space. Feet not far from the way out. You gather the mother's breath with yours and guide her onto her knees. Hips open, gravity helps. Your fingers find a foot, then another, and you resist the hurry that fear suggests. A chill drafts through the thatch and pins a small curl of smoke above the lamp. The husband mutters a saint's name once and then bites it off like a man ashamed of needing help. The aunt's hand shakes and then steadies when your voice returns to its calm measure. You prepare for the moment when speed becomes the safer choice. Cloths sit ready, cord waits. The ampulla stands where you set it, glass no bigger than a thumb. You look at it once and then return to the mother's back, where your palm can invite a turn. The feet come first, then legs, tiny and strong. You keep the body warm as it shows itself, never pulling, only guiding. Shoulders narrow against the world. You ask for the next breath to come deep and sure. The mother answers, and you feel the body listen. A small face appears, mouth still, skin pale with effort. No sound comes yet. You count the beats in your own wrist and then in the small chest that has not learned to rise. The aunt makes a sound that is not a word. You keep your voice low. You rub the back once and then twice with a cloth warmed by the bowl. The chest shifts under your palm with a catch and a refusal. You speak the name the parents chose and then the other name all children have at the start. The room leans in. Your other hand reaches without looking for the glass you placed on the chest rail. The ampulla sits where it should. You thumb the stopper and tilt, letting drops gather. They fall in a small path over the soft crown. Your breath measures a slow count between them. Heat from the bowl warms the cloth you lay along the ribs. You rub again, this time firmer, this time inviting a fight. The tiny chest answers with a twitch like a bird waking. You hold the child close and share the heat from your own skin. The first child sighs against the mother's collarbone and roots without opening eyes. You tell the aunt to keep that small mouth busy. She obeys and finds work for hands that were shaking a moment ago. The husband's face goes slack with awe and fear. A second twitch gathers into a thin sound. Startling and brave, it breaks and then returns. You feel the rhythm catch under your palm and swell into something that can carry a body. You keep rubbing until the sound decides to stay. You settle the second child beside the first and make a shelter with towels. The mother laughs once and then cries with a relief that empties and fills in one breath. You check chords, count fingers, test heat, and praise the plain courage sitting in this narrow bed. Plain lines carry the room's calm. Midwives carry water in small flasks because roads and bells do not always match need. Some cottages lie too far from priests when breath fails. A steady plan on nights like this earns peace in the daylight. You tie and cut when the time is right. You set a stitch where the body asks for it and none where it does not. The aunt folds the stained cloths into a basket and turns her face away for a blink, then turns back, ready again. The husband asks if the children will live. You tell him they will feed now, and feeding is the best answer. He nods and clings to that sentence like a rung on a wet ladder. His shoulders drop a thumb's width. You place the glass back on the chest rail and dry the lip with the corner of your sleeve. The lamp circle loosens, edges softer now that heat and breath are plain. You count faces without moving your lips. Witnesses are named in your head and will be remembered. Outside, frost glitters where ruts hold shallow water. The quarry wind steals warmth from the lane. Inside, two small mouths take their first lessons without complaint. The aunt begins to smile with her whole face. By the door, a herb bundle hangs dry and bitter, and its sharp scent lifts as you ease the latch. The wooden bowl cools in your hands while the news arrives. A neighbour stands in your doorway with a face you know from market days, pinched by hurry. She says the parish clerk wants your name. Says there were whispers about herbs and words you keep close for steadiness. Her gaze flicks to the pouch at your belt and then back to your eyes. Your hand sets the bowl on the table without sound. A cloth wipes the rim, slow and neat, because neatness steadies what worry shakes. You slide the bowl aside and reach for your cloak. The strap pulls across your shoulder with a practical weight. Morning cold brightens the lane and makes breath show. Frost holds along the ditch and turns last year's nettles to white lace. A crow steps on the fence rail as if testing the world's new hardness. Your feet find the ruts without thinking. A quiet sum runs through your head. Nurse the weak child at the mill later. Keep the crofters' twins warm by advising the aunt. Face the questions now before rumour hardens. Mother and children must live. Your oath must stand. Your name must carry its own weight. The church sits on a bluff where stone looks down at clay. A porch stretches out like a hand half open to the village. Worn boards show where years have taught feet to pause. The door keeps a smell of old smoke and damp lime. At the church porch, women quietly claim a sprig of rue pinned by the post keeps gossip light when ash smudges and milk turns. Lift the rue sprig from the porch post and tuck it into your pouch. You step under the porch and feel a plank greet your heel. A bench waits against the wall, carved by idle knives into leaves and fish. The rope that once held notices has left a shallow groove. Winter took the cord last month. A fly wakes on the sill and changes its mind. Inside the dim, a vestry stands small as a stool. A table holds a ledger, a chipped inkwell, and a knife for trimming quills. A stool keeps the prayer book off damp. The air smells of lime wash and wool. A clerk with a thin neck and a cut on his thumb looks up from the page. He tests your face for fear and finds none he can use. His voice asks for the tale of last night, but his eyes want the shortcut to blame. You answer with plain pieces in the order they happened. He reaches for the quill and makes its nib sharp against the knife. Ink moves into the split like a drop into cloth. He writes your name and the place where you keep your stool. The scratch sounds louder than it should. They keep small books here, papers that grow like creeping vines along a wall. Entries hold names, fees, and notes about quarrels and promises. Parish penance entries note dried rue and rushed water in the crofter's cottage. Press the vestry door and meet the clerk's eye. Your breath stays even. You tell him a coin sat to ease a mind that feared bad luck and nothing else. You say the water fell in drops because a child would not breathe, and that the church knows those words belong to women when feet cannot cross muddy lanes. Your hands stay quiet on the table's edge. He scratches another line and noses the inkwell as if scent itself could judge you. He glances at your pouch. You let your palm rest on the wood as if pressing a page flat. When he finally asks for your sign, you set your mark where he points. Name, he says, though he's written it twice already. You give the name again, even and calm. Then you give the millers, the sisters, and the boys who ran. You add the crofter's name and the aunt who hummed 2 notes. He writes slower after the 3rd name, as if witnesses have mass. Your mind holds the oath. Not to summon, not to bind, not to promise more than hands and water and breath can do. You repeat it once in your head and let it settle like a stone. The clerk watches your mouth move and tightens his thin lips. He asks about the ribbon some saw on your table. You tell him you used it to bind hair, not fate, and that it sat near cloth because rooms need a line that looks like order. He writes a half line and stops when ink dries at the nib. The knife nicks the quill and the edge shows fresh. Behind the wall, someone sweeps the nave. The brush whispers in a circle and returns. A draft lifts the edge of a page and sets it back. The ordinary world refuses to catch fire on his suspicion. You speak of the twins and the second child coming feet first. You explain your hands and the cloths and the breath you asked for, steady and deep. His eyes flick to your palms as if expecting marks. They show only the small cracks of winter and the stain of oil. You let a kinder piece into the room. A man you know did not mean harm when he whispered about rue. Fear makes small things look large when a child gasps. The clerk writes another line and taps the quill against his thumb. He asks whether you kept names for the books. You answer that you do, kept in your head like the count of cloths. He considers whether that will do. He draws a thin line through a word and replaces it with another. Your feet remember how many times you've stood on lines like these. In rooms where men keep books, you keep your voice low and your nouns short. You stick to hands and heat and the number of breaths between changes. He closes the ledger just enough to make a sigh. An usher peeks through the vestry door and carries questions in his eyebrows. The clerk flicks him away with a pinch of fingers and returns to the page, as if surprised to find it tame. He points once at a blank and waits for your mark again. You set it down as steady as a stitch. He asks if you'll send for the priest to bless the children. You say that the mill stands a short lane from the church and the crofter 2 lanes beyond, and that the road will hold a mule by midday. He writes this line as if it were a comfort he can lend back later. When the quill empties to a pale grey, he lifts the inkwell and frowns. You feel a smile tug but let it rest. The table edge pushes a flat kindness into your palms. You ask if he wants to see the pouch. He shakes his head, unhappy to find himself reasonable. You step back from the table. The stool latch clicks like a little verdict. The clerk rubs his thumb where ink stained the cut and says you may go. You bend your head as if passing a beam and return to the porch. The bench catches a piece of sun. The village is out in small ways. A man mends a strap. A girl drags a stick in the frost and watches her path darken. A bell rope dangles in the tower mouth. Cut short, waiting repair. You breathe once and turn for the lane. On your way past the porch post, you feel the pouch tap your hip. The rue sprig sits inside like a dry green smile. You'll hang it in your kitchen where steam rises. You'll keep it away from eyes that mistake comfort for sorcery. The thought lowers your shoulders by a finger's width. Back in the lane, you count your evening calls and the milk you promised to check. A woman with a basket asks after the miller's child and nods at the answer. You hear only ordinary worry in her voice. The world lacks appetite for scandal when bread needs mixing. By the time you reach your door, the house has that smell of lived-in peace you know by heart. Ash and wool and old wood. A faint sweetness from the last loaf. You set the latch with a small click and let the quiet hold you a moment. Back home. The straw mattress prickles your wrist when you lay down the basket. Smoke lifts thin above the straw mattress as you set the basket down. Wick curls, a tiny black question at the tip, then steadies when you pinch and trim. Grease beads along the lip and pools in a shallow mirror that throws back a wavering shape of your knuckles. The room smells of milk and ash and last night's work. Your fingers check the child's chest where breath faltered before. The rise is there, small and faithful. A hand to the heel finds a twitch, then a second. You lift the tiny body to your shoulder and feel the weight that fear always makes seem lighter than it is. Outside the shutter, lane talk passes like a slow cart, bad air. Herbs, a ribbon on your table. Frost crusts the sill and pricks your wrist where the wood gaps. A hen scolds in the yard, and the mill wheel mumbles to itself. Slower in morning chill. The world keeps working while rumour looks for room. A small resolve holds in your chest, settle the weak mouth on the breast. Teach the measure. Leave warmth, then go hear whatever must be heard. Mother and child must live. So must your name if you're to keep them living. You place the baby belly down along your forearm and stroke from neck to back. Warm and slow. The mouth wakes with a searching turn. The mother's face is grey with the kind of tired that sits behind the eyes. You ask for her hand, guide it to the small shoulders, and show the path your thumb will take. Bread softens in a bowl with warm water by the hearth. The sister set it there when she feared milk would lag. You move the bowl aside. First food belongs to the breast if the child can master it. The towel under your wrist drinks a pearl of grease from the candle and shows a clean circle. Neighbours mutter in the lane that damp flour and a shut shutter trap sickness when the wheel slows and smoke hangs. Lift the shutter latch and set a narrow gap for the draught. Your palm returns to the small back. You line the nipple with a knuckle and wait for the mouth to open wide enough to take what it needs. The child fusses, then latches, then slips. You keep the position and count the beats aloud. 3 slow, then a breath, then 3 again. The mother copies the rhythm and watches hope rise and fall with it. A blunted pen rasps along the consistory act book's edge when complaints about herbs thicken. You remember that sound and keep your tone even as the sister asks if the rue sprig may stay above the lintel. You nod and say it harms no one, and the mother lets out a breath she did not know she held. Your hand shifts the baby's chin to free the nose, lips round better this time, and the jaw begins to work in a small, purposeful march. Heat travels into your wrist and up your forearm as tension leaks from the mother's shoulders. The wheel outside picks up a little as if the stream had listened. Jeanne, the baker's wife, insists the miller's damp sacks sour the air when ash clings and shutters stick. Press the shutterboard again and settle it against the latch so the gap holds. The miller hovers at the landing and asks if smoke is to blame. You tell him smoke stings eyes and throats but does not make a child forget how to feed. He nods like a man given a tool at last and goes to sweep the hearth's edge, trying to turn fear into action. His boots make a small, useful music on the boards. The mouth loses its grip a second time. You tuck the baby closer, belly to belly with the mother, and lift the breast a hair to shape its weight. Your forefinger presses lightly under the lower lip and the upper lip flanges as it should. The jaw finds a steadier press and swallow, and the small throat works in the way you want to hear. You speak of small measures, warmth under both bodies, draught kept tame, time counted by swallows, not by hope. The sister listens like a student and repeats your count in a softer voice. The mother fumbles once and then finds her own sure hold. The bowl of softened bread cools and goes ignored. In these parishes, women sometimes hire a neighbour to nurse when sickness or famine thins milk. Penance entries sometimes mark the payment when gossip makes it a quarrel as well as a kindness. You've seen names that later needed smoothing, and you prefer to anchor milk in the house when you can. You lift the baby off to test the latch. The mouth opens wide again when cheek brushes breast. The tongue sits forward where it should now. The swallow answers with a tiny, regular click you have learned to love. You count 10, and the mother smiles for the first time today. At the stair, a man clears his throat and does not enter. You recognise the clerk's thin voice asking after bread promised to the poor box, and, perhaps, your presence here. The miller answers in a low tone that his wife feeds, and that answer serves as a gate you need not post yourself. You keep your eyes on the baby's chin. You show the sister how to switch sides without losing heat. Hands slip, towels shift, the baby protests, and then settles with surprising grace. The mother closes her eyes and listens to the swallow notes you count. It becomes a small song none of you'll name. A thought passes plain and dry. When bell ropes hang short and roads cut deep, women carry the parish more than men know. You'll have to carry words as well as hands today. But this room gets the first and best of you. The baby's fingers uncurl against the towel. A hiccup startles a laugh out of the sister that turns into a hand over her mouth. You smile without showing teeth and say to let the child decide the next pause. The mother nods and strokes the tiny back with 2 careful fingers. You ask for a cup of warm ale for the mother and nothing else in it. The sister reaches, pours, and steadies the rim against a cloth. Foam lifts and falls. The mother drinks and swallows and keeps the baby's back still with her other hand. Names line up in your head as you watch witnesses here again, and later, if asked. The clerk may hear them. You already feel the old habits settle. The quiet count that keeps you safe. Cord tied, knife wrapped, ampulla sealed. Now names and breaths and swallows find their own columns. You show how to burp 2 fingers, then pause. Shoulder supports the head. Towel waits for the little spill. The child obliges with a tiny bubble that earns a grin from the landing. You hide your own easier breath in a cough. A breeze tests the room and fails. The shutterboard holds the gap you set for it. Smoke lifts clean and threads the beam rather than clinging. You move the bowl farther from the bed so no one is tempted to feed fear instead of hunger. The sister asks how often to change sides. You answer with a time she can measure by the wheel's turn and the slow toss of the miller's dog in sleep. She laughs despite herself. Ordinary measures travel better than prayer when rooms get worried. You lift the baby once more and test the latch with a knuckle to the cheek. The mouth opens, takes, and keeps. The throat works in a small, strong rhythm you could count with your eyes closed. You let your shoulders drop a thumb's width. You tell the miller you will come back by noon to listen again. He nods and finally steps into the room to stand where you set him. He looks at the breast, then at the baby's ear, as if afraid to frighten the swallow. His hands hang loose now, empty of groundless jobs. A line waits by the door where a neighbour pretends to tie a shoe and hears half your words. You'll pass her in the lane and give her the peace she wants most, that a child fed while a window stood open. She can carry that rather than herbs and fear. You gather your basket, tally the towels, and touch the ampoulla's stopper for comfort rather than need. The candle's pool has set into a soft puck. You pinch the wick lower and leave a safe stub for later. The room has the look of a place that will manage the next hours without you. Toward dusk, the church bell rolls from the bluff in even notes that carry down the lane. The hearth embers sink low as the church bell settles beyond the bluff. Heat holds in a small red seam along the ash. You nudge it with the iron and breathe once to feel how the room answers. Your basket waits by the door with cloths folded and your knife wrapped. You decide to go before talk gathers more speed. The mill lane has a way of turning guesses into rules by noon. Cloak over shoulders, pouch at belt, ampulla sealed and safe. You lift the latch, frost trims the hedges and crunches underfoot in a thin, brittle music. Down past the orchard, the path joins the road to town. A cart rolls slow with sacks tied high against damp, and the driver tips 2 fingers. Your breath shows and vanishes. Stone shows through the ruts where yesterday's thaw failed to mend. You match your stride to the cold. The church rises above the clay roofs like a hand set to rest. The porch beam keeps knife scratches from boys too young for work. A bench runs along the wall, polished by years of waiting. You open the vestry door and step into wool and lime air. Ink hangs in the small room the way beer does in a cellar. A table holds a ledger, a chipped inkwell, and a knife for quills. The clerk from yesterday stands aside while a senior man smooths a page with his palm. He looks at your pouch first and your face second. You search for the plainest road through this room. Speak what you did. Name who saw. Show the oath bound to your work. Your voice needs to keep a level ground under it. Hands stay still on the table's edge. He asks for order, and you give it the miller's cottage first. The cry, the count, the water, the breath that came late and then stayed. Then the crofter's cottage, the twins, the feet-first child, the drops when a chest would not lift. You use exact words for small things and let big words keep quiet. A chipped quill scratches the parish register's margin as he writes the cottage names. The nib catches, then glides. He dots a letter like a man pinning a moth. You hold your breath to keep from laughing at that private habit. He asks what sat on your table besides cloth and cord. You say bread and a ribbon to bind hair. He writes ribbon, stops, and waits for your face to change. It does not. He draws a line through the word and writes hair tie with a slow stroke. Your oath sits ready behind your teeth. You speak it the way you first learned it. No binding, no summons, no harm. Hands, water, warmth, breath, witness, and a priest when feet can reach him. Your words carry the steadiness you learned on nights when wheels sang and windows steamed. He chews the quill and frowns at the chew mark he made. Speak plain, he says. You say again that simple things calm rooms, a coin to soothe the mind, a ribbon to keep hair from falling, salt to settle a stomach when dread churns it. You do not call any of them power. You call them what they are: tokens, tools, tastes. His eyes travel to your pouch as if it might rattle back an answer. You unloop it and tip its mouth to show linen, a twist of salt, a small pot of oil. The ampulla stays tucked, because no one needs ceremony where breath is steady. You do not hide it either. If asked, you'll show it without drama. He writes oil and pauses. What for? He asks. Though he knows, touch should not burn skin, you answer, skin should not tear when patience can save it. You keep your tone plain, as if discussing flour and damp. He nods, but pretends he did not. The other clerk watches with the bored patience of a man who has copied the same prayer into 3 books. He flips a page with a dry whisper and blots a line with the back of his hand. Parish register marks rue, oil, and cloth among witnesses. Press the vestry door and let the latch click in the clerk's hearing. You rest your palm on the wood and keep your voice even. The latch's small sound folds into the room and stays there. The senior man writes witness, then writes it again as if 2 are not already enough. A thought walks past the table in dry boots. Clerks keep small books with dues, quarrels, and names because memory fails when seasons turn hard. Midwives in Anjou swear before priests and keep water by the bed because roads and bells are slow. When fear rises, questions move to tables, answers do better there than at doors. He asks about the church bell yesterday evening, whether you took it for a sign. You say you took it for time and for company. A bell is a bell, it does not judge a birth. His mouth tightens, then loosens, as if that answer had slipped a knot he did not tie well. He asks who stood in the room when the drops fell. You give the names again, in the same order. The miller at the doorpost, the sister at the shoulder, the boy at the threshold, at the crofter's, the aunt with the lamp and the husband at the lintel. He writes, and the pen scratch sounds less sharp now. He studies your hands like a man judging a tool. You spread your fingers so he can see the winter cracks and the small stain in the nail where oil worked. Nothing magical sits in the webbing or the scars. Only work sits there. You ask if he wants you to send the women to speak, or if names will do. He tilts his head, weighing bother against duty. He says to bring one by noon if you pass that way. You nod. It is a request he can later call an order if need be. A draft touches the page and lifts its corner. He pins it with a knuckle and sighs. Your eyes drift to the ledgers stacked on a shelf, where the bindings lean like men least eager for work. A mouse chews at the baseboard and finds nothing to reward him. He asks if you have set aside any herbs that might trouble a priest. You say you keep no such store. You prefer to know exactly how a thing works. And when you do not know, you leave it alone. He marks a word you cannot read and passes the quill to the thinner clerk to dry his hand. He offers to write that your oath stands and that you showed your pouch. You answer that you would be grateful. Gratitude gets more done than defiance on mornings like this. He nods and writes in a careful, flatter hand. The thinner clerk clears his throat and asks if the twins cried. You say they did. One thin and one like a kettle when it first sets to hum. He smiles at the image and wipes it off his face by habit. The senior man pretends not to have seen. He pushes the ledger toward you and taps a blank by your name. You set your mark steady, the way you set a stitch. He blots the page with a fold of linen so old it has learned obedience. The ink dries without smearing. He rises finally and smooths his gown as if it were the page. He says the priest will ride by noon if the road holds. If not, he will send a boy with a message for tomorrow. You thank him as if it were entirely his idea. At the door you turn and ask if he will write the line about witnesses cleanly. He grunts assent without looking up. The thinner clerk gives a quick nod you are not meant to see. It is enough. You step back into the porch where cold brightens wood to gold. A girl frowns at a strap and pulls a stitch through with her teeth. A rooster complains and gets no answer. The bell rope hangs cut and patient above the entry. Outside the porch, the brass ewer gleams where a stray sunbeam finds it. The swaddling cloth rides on top of your basket while the brass ewer's gleam still hangs in your eye. Its remembered shine feels foolish on a road rutted hard by cartwheels. Mud skins over last night's thaw and cracks where hooves beat it thin. Your cloak takes the wind and shakes, then settles to your shoulders. A man from the far meadows found you before the porch had cooled. He spoke in broken breaths about a narrow room, a hard turn, and a wife whose hands clawed at the bedrope. He walks now at your side without looking up. His knuckles tap the basket rim each time he stumbles. Breath puffs pale ahead of both your mouths. A rook lifts from a hedge and scolds, then wheels away. The path bends toward a line of pollarded willows and the ground tips down. You shorten your stride so his worry does not drag him faster than is useful. A thought, plain and fixed, keeps its place. Mother and child must live. If the child sits wrong, patience draws out what speed cannot. Your jaw finds a tighter set as you test each step with the ball of your foot. The cottage stands long and low, thatch patched with turf squares where last wind took bites. Smoke threads from a hole and smears itself along the beam. A door curtain hangs heavy with damp. A lantern crouches on a peg, unused, as if saving wick for deep night. Your knuckles find the curtain's edge and lift it. The room presses close with wool, sour milk, damp wood, and fear. A small girl sits on a stool with her knees hugged tight. An older woman faces the bed with a cloth twisted to a rope in both hands. The labouring woman groans into her own sleeve. You set the basket down and free the swaddling cloth from the top. Linen slides under the woman with your practice fold. The older woman eases the girl to the hearth with a pat that is more order than comfort. Your breath becomes the room's metronome again. A hand to the low belly reads a shape you do not want. The hard round you should meet where the basin widens sits high. Lower, where a brow should press. You feel softness that speaks of buttocks or feet. The backline's wrong, its ridge too quick under your palm. You glance at the aunt, who knows the reading of faces, and let your own give nothing away. You ask the husband for water. He spills half a bowl before his hand learns its business. The aunt brings the lamp closer, then thinks of the oil and moves it back. Linen folds become a path for your hands. Oil warms thinly. Cold clings to everything else. You speak a plan as if reading a familiar list. Turn if the body allows. Invite knees to open. Keep heat against the small back and your palm where ribs must learn to move. The woman's eyes lock to yours and take a little of your steadiness. Dry facts cross the room and settle the air. Villages in Anjou keep names of midwives in episcopal registers beside baptisms performed when roads fail or bells hang still. Books do not say how rooms smell or how wind climbs under doors. Women learn such lines by palms, not by pens. You ask for the rope tied to the beam and gauge its strength. The aunt nods and braces the knot with her foot. You guide the mother onto her knees for the next 2 waves. Hips open. The strap you carry anchors a thigh and makes work into shape. Fingers go low again. Slower this time. A small foot answers. Slick, brave, and wrong. You cup it with the soft heel of your hand without pulling. The second foot hides just beyond the gate you wish it had not found. You speak to the mother about breath as a thing you can ride. The next swell takes the wind out of her so cleanly that she folds forward. You steady a shoulder and set her back the width of your hand. The aunt hums one note without hearing herself. The girl by the hearth matches it with a thin echo. Oil helps your touch not trouble skin. The first foot comes farther than you allow, and then pauses because you ask it to. You keep warmth wrapped around what the world should not see yet. Your other palm smooths the sacrum in small patient circles. A sudden slow drip stains the sheet darker than clear waters. The smell tells its story before your eyes do. You call for more linens and say the least that keeps courage from breaking. The aunt sets her jaw like a cooper setting a hoop. A turn becomes the only good road. You guide the mother onto her side and brace her knee with the strap. Your fingers wait for the second foot to come when the next swell open space. You count where the body can hear your count. The husband backs into the post and stays there, finally taught the use of stillness. His breath turns shallow and you ignore it. The girl has fallen asleep in a crooked posture by the hearth. You ignore that too. All your senses narrow to what your palms can learn. The second foot offers itself with a small pride, slick against your knuckle. You cup it and keep it close to its fellow without draw. Heat matters more than haste. The body will do what it knows if fear does not stampede it. A wave climbs, crests, and fails. The mother curses with a force that steadies her. You ask for a swallow of ale for her mouth and a warm cloth for your wrist. The aunt moves with the snap of someone given useful work. Your fingertips rid the twitch where rib should show soon. You keep the small belly against warmth. You ask for 3 breaths and then another 3. The mother finds them with a sob and makes them steady anyway. There is a moment, long and cruel, when nothing moves. You talk about bread, about the way a loaf sings when it cools and the tiny sounds it makes. The mother reaches toward that picture and does not find it, but the reach itself lessens the room's sharpness. The next swell gives the body to your hands in stages. Calves slip, then thighs. You keep the weight along your forearm and your palm guards the belly. Heat stays close. Cloths take their stains and forgive. You prepare the space for a head that will be late. Your roll waits open. A strap lies ready to shift the angle of a knee. The lamp stays wide of the bed by your order. The aunt holds the woman's shoulder where you showed her. The husband says one word that is both prayer and apology. You do not answer him. Your eyes stay on the line where you expect the shoulders to turn. Your breath falls into 4s, and you count them without sound. A small arm slips free when it should not. You lay it along the chest and cover it with warmth. Fear pushes at your back like wind up a narrow lane. You lean into the push and do not move. Another arm threatens to join the first. You set it gentle and firm where it must rest. Your hand goes to the back to invite the turn that unlocks the rest. A breath leaves your mouth as if from a place lower than lungs. 3 cool facts line themselves where panic tries to write. Warmth keeps small muscles from seizing. Waiting for the right angle saves strength you'll need. Calling for help will cost lives when lanes suck hooves to the fetlock. You think of the knife wrapped in your roll. It has work you hope it will not do. Your throat tightens at that thought and then loosens because hope alone does not move bodies. Your hands must. The next swell brings a thin gasp from the mother that breaks and reforms. You tell her to ride it low. You press at the sacrum and feel a back answer with a grudging shift. The line you needed begins to show. A palm goes to the small chest and reads a quick pulse in a place you wish did not teach you anything. You speak the child's chosen name in your head and add the other small name that belongs to all children at the start. It steadies you more than you expect. You ask the aunt to lift the mother's knee by one finger's width. She does it as if threading a needle. The angle opens, a shoulder narrows, the body obeys a rule older than your work. Heat drops from your wrist where the cloth slipped. You correct it without looking. The mother swears softly and then breathes into the strap. Your hands learn a new quiet they have not had to hold before. The child's back shows to the lamp, slick and stubborn. You rub along it once with a warm cloth to invite lungs to think about their task. They do not yet. You do not let that fact speak in your face. Your mind photographs the table back in your cottage ampulla. Cord, knife, thread. It offers the image and you set it aside. The room has what it needs because your hands have it. Time measures itself now by choices rather than by bells. You ask for the swaddling cloth you set first and fold it twice. Its clean weight matters. You pad the palm that must cradle a head when it comes last. The aunt sees and understands a little and becomes braver. The next swell will be the one that tells you which road you must take. Your shoulders square without your asking them to. The woman grips the bed rope and finds a voice she thought she had spent. You keep your breath small and sure. The cloth warms under your fingers from the heat you carry. Your other hand settles where it must. The line you waited for starts to offer itself. Tiny and slow. You nod once, more to your bones than to anyone else. The holy water ampulla warms against your palm while the narrow room holds still. The umbilical knife waits beside the ampulla while the narrow room holds its breath. Steel sits wrapped in linen the way you set it on calmer nights. The blade's edge has the clean look you test with a thumbnail and a thought. Cloth under it shows the neat fold you trust when hands must move fast. Your palm returns to the small back that glistens under the lamp. The child's body rides your forearm, warm and heavy for its size. A shoulder narrows just enough, then stops as if the world had caught it by the tunic. Your other hand steadies the sacrum with a pressure you have learned to keep patient. Breath breaks out of the mother and tries to run. You bring it back with a count she can bear. The aunt keeps her post at the knee strap and hums the single note she found earlier. Oil keeps your touch from burning where skin is tight with effort. The next swell brings a new trouble, small and cruel. The cord shows where it should not, drawn tight over what must soon take air. Your breath flattens in your chest and then flares again. Controlled now by the rule that never changes. Mother and child must live. A hand goes for the linen wrap without looking. The knife lies where you set it to be found by memory, not by sight. You speak 2 words to the mother to keep her still and 1 to the aunt to hold the knee an inch higher. The room obeys. You press warm cloth around the small chest to guard heat. Fingers find the cord's pull and read its story in the way the pulse tugs back. The next good road stands clear and narrow. You do not love it. You take it anyway. Steel slides free into your palm without scrape or flash. Your thumb rests along its back to shorten what might tremble. A stroke that is more decision than motion solves the cruel loop. Red shows quick and then calms under the pressure your wrist already knew to set. The room does not know whether to cheer or fear you. It chooses to wait. You lay the knife on the folded linen and set 2 fingers to close what you have opened. Cord ends lie short and safe now. No longer stealing breath before breath can be learned. Heat must return to where fear carried it off. You rub the back once, slow and firm. The little chest answers with a twitch that is not yet a breath. Your own count falls to 3 and then to 2 to keep your hands honest. A dry thought steadies hands at the bed. Parish officers keep small lines about midwives and hard births because memory cracks when years do. Consistory Act books note ampullae and linen after breach births near quarry lanes. Press the ampulla flat against the chest rail and feel glass kiss wood. You bring the cloth back to the ribs and trace what the lungs must learn. The mother's face has gone still in a way that frightens men and serves women. Stillness spends less. You ask for one long breath from her, and her body finds it despite its anger. That breath frees a little space. Fingertips seek the jaw and find it slack from labour's long grind. The mouth shows itself and stays quiet, stubborn as a locked chest. You curve a hand along the small spine and give it a single firm stroke. The room leans its whole weight toward hearing. A noise only barely qualifies as sound arrives and fails. It returns as a squeak, then fails again. You answer not with hope, but with the same stroke that makes blood consider moving. The aunt whispers a name as if names were tinder. You let her have that. You test the angle at the shoulder and ask the aunt to lift the knee a finger's width more. The angle shifts. The line you needed offers itself. Your hand takes it and refuses to hurry where hurrying would be worse than waiting. Light from the lamp makes a circle on the wet curve of the back. You keep your attention where the circle is not. The knife waits on its linen like a thing that has done enough for one room. The father cannot decide whether his prayer should stop or start again. Breathe. It is one word for the child and for you. You rub again and keep heat against the ribs. The mouth opens wider than before and stays there as if considering. The chest rises a little and then flutters. You repeat what works because rooms like this reward repetition more than invention. When roads clog and bells hang, entries about hard births gather near winter in the clerk's books. You think that without looking up, and it steadies your hands as if your mind had set its elbows on a table. The aunt takes a breath she did not plan to, and the mother's shoulders answer that breath with a shiver that helps more than shouting. Another small rise answers your palm. It holds longer this time. A thin cry follows and breaks like ice, then mends into something with corners. The whole house exhales. You do not yet. You turn the child belly down across your forearm and rub again from neck to lower back. The jaw works now with a stubborn little rhythm that has nothing to do with your count. You praise that independence silently. The mother reaches and stops, waiting for permission her body wants, but her fear has paused. You give it by moving only your hand, shoulder to shoulder. Skin finds skin. Heat travels faster that way than any prayer you know. The small mouth learns the business of being alive. It is not graceful. You do not require grace. Cord ends get your attention again because order now saves pain later. You tie clean and short. The knife does its last job with no ceremony at all. Linen gathers its stains like a ledger that understands what it keeps. You check the mother with 2 fingers and an eye trained to spot what would steal strength in an hour. A small tear asks for tidy work and gets it. The aunt keeps the lamp where you can see without bringing flame near what should never court it. The father hides a sob in his sleeve in a way that embarrasses no one. Your mouth, dry now, tastes of iron and old smoke. You ask for a swallow of ale for the mother and plain water for yourself. The aunt moves without looking away from the small face that is working very hard at being ordinary. You finally let your shoulders drop a fraction. A dry smile visits your mouth and goes. It comes when a room has obeyed the rule that kept you honest. Mother and child must live. The words have done their work again. You'll speak them later like a blessing rather than a command. The girl by the hearth wakes with a start and looks ashamed of sleeping. You tell her she guarded the fire well, which is true enough to help. She sits straighter and keeps her eyes on the towel that shelters the feet. You tuck one edge tighter and feel the warmth hold. You return the knife to its wrap with the care of a woman stowing a friend after a fight. Cloth folds over steel in neat thirds. The ampulla goes back to the pouch, stoppered and clean. The chest rail takes the weight of your palm while the room learns to be easy again. You show the mother how to draw the child higher without losing the seal a mouth has made. Hands move, towels shift, and the little protest ends in a swallow. Time begins to flow in the slow way that leaves no marks on walls. Work turns into watching. You think of witnesses and line them up in your head. The aunt here, the husband there, the girl by the hearth if the clerk wants to be thorough. Names will do better than superstition if talk grows teeth later. You trust names more than moods. You bank the lamp wick down a hair. The circle of light tightens to what you still need. The aunt wipes her cheek as if she has finally remembered her own face. The mother laughs and winces and laughs again, then turns the laugh into breath at the hearth. Smoke loosens into a sweeter smell as ash settles and fat dies from the pan. The mortar smells faintly of hearth smoke as you set it back on the shelf. Stone lip shows a thin crescent of polish where years of grinding have made their own patience. A dusting of fennel clings to the rim, harmless as a memory. You wipe it with a corner of linen and let the object return to its quiet work of being ordinary. Your shoulders square before you lift the basket. Cloths sit counted. The ampulla ride's stoppered. The knife sleeps in its wrap. Names line in your head like Stitches Miller. Sister, boy, crofter, aunt, husband, the girl by the hearth if asked. Breath goes in even, comes out even, and carries your feet to the lane. The vestry stands cool and chalk-scented when you reach the church. Light leaks sideways through a leaded pane and finds dust turning in the slow air. Boards remember every heel that has worried them. A bench waits with knife-scratched leaves and fish, just as yesterday. A thought keeps its simple place. Your craft needs clearance as much as rooms need warmth. Mother and children must live, and your name must live enough to be called again. You set your palm on the door plank and push. Inside. The table holds the same ledger, the same chipped inkwell, the same knife for trimming quills. The senior clerk sits straighter today, and the thin one looks less eager to find a fire where there is none. You greet them like neighbours at a regate. Your voice keeps the calm you've earned in other rooms. You did not come alone. The miller steps to the doorpost by habit, hands still at last. His sister shows clean palms because she believes clean palms talk for her. The crofter's aunt brings a lamp because it made her brave last night, and she sees no reason to switch tools. The husband stands by the lintel and holds the edge like a man keeping a boat steady. You tell the order of things in the order they happened. You say the cry, the count, the angle that went wrong and the hand that waited until it went right. You speak of drops of water when breath failed and the breath that followed. You leave none of it large enough to frighten. You leave none of it small enough to forget. The thin clerk sharpens a quill on the little knife until the nib agrees to work. He scratches your name and the cottage's names. When he slows, you give him the witnesses again. Not to bully him with numbers, but to give him boards to stand on. He writes steadier after the third name. Jean, a midwife from the far side of the brook, waits on the bench with her hands folded. You asked her to come because knowledge travels better when it carries two voices. She nods when you speak of straps and knees and the way oil saves skin when patience does the rest. The senior clerk pretends not to hear her, which is his way of recording that he has. The book sits open, and the room permits a small, plain truth. Oaths you swore were kept. Water you kept ready was used when breath would not come. Witnesses saw hands and heat and the slow turning that makes fear waste its strength. You hold your tongue while they shape that truth into lines. A brief, neutral breath crosses the table. Parish officers meet in small rooms to weigh names and nights, then return to dues and marriages. Notes about midwives gather near winter when roads slow, carts and bells hang still. Along the edge of consistory act book, a clerk records linen, oil, and ash-scented air. Press the vestry door and feel the latch bump your wrist. Your hand settles back on the table edge. The senior clerk clears his throat and asks the miller what he saw. The miller answers with the slow competence of a man who has learned where to put his weight. He speaks of pacing the stair, of hearing your count, of a thin cry that grew. The thin clerk writes as if each word had just taught him its shape. The sister tells of cloths folded, of your hand on a brow, of the way breath obeyed you once it had decided to return. The aunt describes feet first, towels warmed, and a moment when the room forgot to breathe before you reminded it. The husband claims he held the lintel because his hands were good for nothing else. And the senior clerk allows himself the ghost of a smile. Jean speaks last, low and even, not as a friend but as a reader of the same text. She names the turn you made and how you waited for shoulders to narrow before you invited the head. She lists what she did not see, no cords tied to bind fate, no words to summon, only the oath's small tools. The table learns from her calm. You keep your own hand still. You do not reach for the pouch unless asked. And when asked, you tip it to show linen and oil and salt. The ampulla stays put until the question comes. And then you bring it out with no theatre. Glass touches wood with a sound no larger than its own size. A simple assertion arrives with the clerk's nod. The book will carry a line that says your oath stands and your work last night was clean. The priest will ride when the road holds to bless what breath already proved. The parish will pay no fine and make no penance where none is due. The thin clerk dots a letter with too much force and blushes. Relief wants to run through your legs. You let it walk. You thank them and mean it, because rooms like this can help or harm, and today they helped. The senior clerk writes witnesses again, slower than before, as if taste matters. Jeanne bows her head once and ties her cloak. A breath like good bread comes back to your ribs. You think of the twins curling under towels and the weak mouth finding its measure at the mill. You think of a blade that did what it had to and no more. You think of the small coin you left under a pillow, harmless as superstition and kinder than fear. Outside the vestry, sun has thinned the frost to beads along the porch rail. A girl drags a stick through thawed mud and writes her name wrong on purpose to see how it looks. You step aside to let a man carry in a sack of wool with pride he tries to hide. Ordinary life insists, as it always does, even when rooms have held their breath. Jeanne lingers at the porch beam and tells you she will bring your name when hers is asked. You nod and promise the same. She laughs once about men who pretend not to hear what they learn from women. Then she tucks her hands into her sleeves and goes down the steps as if into wind, even though there is none. You turn your face toward the mill and the crofters' lane. Work waits in the ordinary way. The will sing truer by noon when the stream wakes. The aunt will want a word about feeding twins at once or one after the other. You place your palm on the basket handle and feel the simple pride of tools counted and cleared. You'll still be careful with ruined ribbons, not because they are danger, but because eyes like drama more than patience. You'll keep your kitchen neat and your door easy to reach. You'll keep water near and words small. Clearance is not a medal, it is space to keep doing what needs doing. At the threshold, you pause only long enough to steady your breath. Names settle where they belong in your head. The table's scratch fades from your ears. The door gives under your hand and then yields you back to the lane. By the church steps, rushes from last feast day lie crushed into the path. They rustle under your shoe in a dry whisper as you pass. The rushlight gutters on the steward's table and throws a thin stripe across the board. Tallow pools in a crooked crescent and clings to the wick. Smoke threads toward a rafter and loses itself in old soot. Wind touches the shutter and goes away, as if turned back by stone. Your knuckles find the latch and lift it. Cold grabs your wrist and then lets go when the steward pushes the door wide. His breath hurries ahead of him. His jaw works as if chewing stone. He says the lady has laboured long, says the household sleeps in corners, says only that you must come. The hall air is tall and mean. Flags along the beam crackle when draughts test their hems. A long board waits under a cloth kept for feast days, folded back in a rush that left the edge wrinkled. The hearth has more ash than flame. A plain rule holds the centre of your mind. Mother and child must live. No other help stands ready. Hands, water, heat, and patience must be enough. The steward leads you through a small door behind the dais. A stair winds tight past niches where a lamp should sit, but does not. Your shoulder brushes stone and picks up damp chill. At the first landing you hear a sound stall, then start, then stall again. Her chamber holds a poor fire and a bed set high on a chest. Rushes lie thin on the floor and give off a dusty smell. A maid sleeps upright on a stool with her head against her forearm. The lady's skin glows with the flat shine that says effort has taken too much. Your basket looks ordinary and brave on the chest lid. Linen sits where you set it, counted and sure. The knife sleeps easy in its wrap. The ampulla rides in your pouch, sealed and small. You warm your palms under your breath and set them to the low belly. The head is near but not sure of its road. The shoulder rides ragged against the rim. The back lies right but wants guidance. Heat, you say. The steward blinks like a man trained to carry wood and take orders at once. He nods and goes, feet quiet on the stair. A thought in 3 sentences walks through the room and stays. Big houses keep fear private when they can, and pride forbids too many neighbours. Lanes to such doors climb and twist, and feet slow when wind cuts. Midwives arrive alone and leave the same, judged by the breaths they kept. The maid wakes hard and looks ashamed. You hand her a cloth and a task warm water. Fold towels, keep the wick trimmed. Her palms learn the pace from your brow more than your voice. She steadies. You move the lady to her side with a strap for the top knee. Hips open a hair. The bed rope takes her grip. Oil warms and keeps your touch from burning. Your fingers find the stubborn place and invite it to release. The room's noise thins to breath, and the small scrape of a brass hook against the board. The steward returns with wood and the smell of wet dog. He feeds the fire with the humility of a man who has run out of speeches. Flames climb where ash sulked. Heat walks back into the corners. You set a clean square of linen where it must wait and count aloud to slow the room's panic. The lady's eyes latch onto the count as if it were a rung. She rides through one swell and then another without losing the number. Your hand matches her with the pressure she can bear. Her brow shows salt. You cool it with a fold dipped in warm water and wrung once. The maid learns that ring and repeats it without a clumsy echo. The strap lifts and settles. The lady breathes into it and lets her jaw hang easy. A small change arrives. The shoulder that rode proud begins to listen. The head comes truer into the basin, not with speed but with purpose. You murmur a praise that is more a rhythm than words. Down the hill, lanes might be busy with men carrying bread and clerks' boys looking important. Here, the hall keeps its own weather. The rushlight steadies and then flares. A draught forgets itself. You keep the lady's breath anchored to your hand. You ask the steward for honeyed water and watch his face for resistances you do not have time to fight. He nods and goes. The maid rises on the balls of her feet and moves the cloth where your elbow asks for space. You hear the house sleep, one snore at a time, and forgive it. Your palm reads the angle again. The head sits low now, the shoulder no longer menaces. You guide the count down and shorten it because the swell asks for less talk. The lady answers by closing her eyes and letting her body do its own arithmetic. The steward returns with a cup that clacks against his teeth. You take it and hold it so the rim touches the lady's lip. No more, no less. She swallows and finds that courage can be sipped when it will not be shouted. The steward stares at his hands. You shift the lady to hands and knees for 3 waves. The bed rope takes her weight. The maid braces the pillow where you point. The turn you wanted offers itself at last. Shy but willing. Hold, you say, one word that carries the room. Your fingers guard the perineum with warm linen. The head rounds under your palm with the honest weight you've prayed for since the stair. Shoulders follow, small and true. Heat blossoms where fear had made cold. No one cheers. It is better that way. You rub the back once to confirm the rhythm wants to live here. A small thin sound arrives and sharpens itself. The lady weeps without noise. You set the child to the breast and praise the work in a sentence without decoration. The maid watches as if learning a trade that might save her own blood one day. The steward turns to face the wall because his face will not obey him. Cord lies slack and safe. You tie and cut neat and short. The knife does its ordinary kindness and goes back to sleep. Linen moves from folded to used, and you account for it in your head as cleanly as coins. The lady's pulse steadies under your fingers. You check for a tear and find one that needs 2 small stitches and no more. The maid holds the lamp wide. Oil keeps your hand gentle when the edge wants to pull. Your whisper numbers repeat inside your mouth. You lift the cup again and ask the maid to keep the cloth warm. She nods with a seriousness that sits well on her thin face. The steward turns back, sees the small mouth working at the breast, and blinks like a man startled by sunlight in winter. A little calm sneaks into the room and hides under the table. You let it stay. You straighten sheets, set the strap aside, place the used linen in a pile that tells a story only you need to remember. The rushlight's wick shortens and the flame behaves. 3 plain thoughts come and go. You will tell no one what did not happen here. The steward will remember your name and forget your face, which is fine. The maid will hold a lamp for someone else one day and do it well. You rinse your hands in warm water and dry them on your own cloth. The hearth gives you back the knuckles you thought cold forever. The lady sighs and the small jaw keeps working without asking for praise. You bring the steward to the foot of the bed and make him witness the ordinary miracle so that he spends less of his life fearing rooms like this. He nods and stands as if given a rank he did not know existed. He asks about a blessing. You tell him the road will carry a rider by morning if ice does not sulk on the hill. You gather your tools, check your count, and teach the maid 3 small tasks to keep until dawn. Bank the hearth, warm the cloth, listen for the swallow. She repeats them back to you without falter. You ease the shutter a finger's width to give the room a breath that will not bite. Before you go, you set a coin under the pillow's corner because tokens calm some hearts better than sermons. It harms no one. It may save a scolding later. You do not argue with harmless comforts. The steward follows you to the small stair and thanks you with a bow too deep for a man in a wool gown. You incline your head and keep your feet sure on the turns. Stone lets go of your shoulder as if accepting a bargain. At the hall door you pause to feel the night. Frost has crept back along the flags. Smoke from the roof hole hangs low and smells of oak and old grease. Your breath makes a ghost and then refuses to become a story. Listening, you catch the church bell roll once over the hill, soft. The shutter gap lets the church bell's soft roll brush your cheek. Light comes thin through the seam and paints a bright line across your table. Your basket waits where you left it. Linen counted and cord coiled. The ampulla sits clean and dry, stoppered like a promise you hope not to need today. Your hand tests the knife's wrap and finds it snug. The oil jar answers with its faint, good scent when you check the lid. A strip of ribbon lies beside the stool like a small river at rest. The birthing stool itself has earned a lean against the wall, legs scarred and honest. Bread and steam make a kind smell near the hearth. You break a crust and carry it with your tools to the mill. The lane remembers your feet and gives way under them. Ruts hold water that wears last night's sky like a thin coat. In the miller's chamber, the straw mattress creaks its greeting. The mother lifts her face with the calm of a woman who has slept and fed. The child at her breast works with purpose. Jaw steady, throat clicking the way you like to hear. The sister hums a tune that accidentally matches your count. You check a stitch and find it neat and painless under your finger. Heat sits where it should and nowhere else. Linen lies dry. The ewer, still clean from last night, catches a spark of window light along its lip. The miller pretends not to hover and fails in a way that pleases you. You ask for a swallow of warm ale for the mother and move the stool with your knee. Hands do small tasks that mean peace. You lift the baby to burp and the towel earns its keep. A bubble comes, obedient and proud, at the crofters. The quarry wind has given up for now. The aunt holds one twin while the mother feeds the other. Both heads tucked under towels that still smell faintly of ashen milk. You show the swap again, slow and sure, so no mouth loses courage. The husband keeps the doorpost the way men keep a gate. Names order themselves in your head as you listen. Aunt, husband, a maid from the hall who asked to watch and learn, the baker's wife who has stopped muttering and started baking a loaf to send. Counting witnesses turns back the appetite of rumour. It is the same as counting cloths. On the hill, the steward's maid catches you at the yard edge. She says the lady sleeps and the small mouth has learned the steady pull that keeps hope simple. She shows you the lamp you told her to hold wide and asks if she trimmed the wick right. You say she did and mean it. A woman by the porch lifts a hand and asks about the miller's child. You answer with the plainest sentence you have, that the window stood open and the baby fed. The woman smiles in relief the way people do when a story shrinks back to the size of a room. She has bread to bake and no time for drama. At the church, the thinner clerk nods to your mark in the book with a quiet satisfaction. The senior clerk speaks of a ride if the road holds. Quill and inkwell look less like teeth and more like tools today. The vestry's air keeps its lime and wool and nothing else. Back home, the rue sprig hangs above your lintel where steam will lift its sharp breath. The ampulla returns to its shelf without ceremony. The knife goes to sleep in its wrap. You wash your hands and feel the day loosen its grip on your shoulders. 2 children sleep under the crofter's towels. One small chest rises where the miller's wife dreams. A lady in a cold room breathes easier while her maid counts swallows. The parish has made room for your hands to move without tripping on talk. That is what clearance means in lanes like these. A thought as brief as a stitch goes through you. This craft works because hands know edges, because heat is shared without fuss, because words stay small. Your name floats in that pool without sinking. It does not need to shine. It needs to be found in a hurry and remembered at dusk. You polish the brass ewer with the corner of a linen square gone thin at the middle. The metal answers with a quiet glow rather than a showy shine. A coin under a pillow somewhere will keep a steward's frown from waking early. A ribbon will keep hair out of a face when sweat runs. These are ordinary mercies and you like them. Toward noon, the church bell rolls along the bluff in easy notes. The bench under your window is warmed. You sit for the first time without a task tugging at your sleeve. A hen scratches under the hedge and finds an impossible prize in frozen earth, then changes her mind about it. You think about nights you would not change and others you would pay to forget. The difference between them is thin as a strap and strong as a vow. Your oath fits in your mouth like a well-worn prayer, not because it is pretty, but because it is useful. It does not lift you above anyone. It sets you to work. Jeanne meets you by the path and carries her own basket as if it were a banner. She asks after the twins and smiles when you answer. You both pretend not to notice the way men in the lane listen without appearing to. It is a good pretense that keeps peace. You oil the stool's pegs and fit the crossbar to the holes so travel will not rattle them loose. The ribbon finds your hair with a practiced knot. The room breathes with you. Ash sifts itself into soft shapes along the iron bar. Your hands rest without trembling. In the quiet, you count what will need replacing before the next call: 2 towels, a coil of thread, a little oil, 1 clean length for a strap. Your mind adds one more thing, the thing you never name but always carry a promise that breath will find a way more often than fear expects. By evening, the mill wheel sings a bit brighter where ice has let go of the race. The crofter's aunt sends a nod from her door and a grin she would not have risked last night. Even the clerk grants you a small courtesy of the chin in passing. The village has decided to be ordinary about you again. That is the right size for your name. It fits on a doorpost and on a page edge. It does not carry rumour well. It carries milk and stitches and the careful knot of a cord cut clean. At your table, you bank the small wick and tidy what a day has scattered. The stool's legs touch the rush-strewn floor and make that friendly scrape, you know. You press your palm to the wood and think of nothing complicated at all. By the hearth, embers glow red and steady, and the room settles. Warmth folds around your shoulders while the bench eases your back. The window seam keeps its sliver of light thin as a straw, and the lane outside quiets until it feels like a hand laid gently across the world. A hen settles in her corner. A kettle sends up a patient curl that finds the low beam and rests. You draw a slow breath and let it go without counting. The basket looks smaller now that the knife sleeps and the ampulla sits safe. Thread lies in its coil like a moon on a dark table. The ribbon at your nape holds with a knot you could undo in your sleep, though you will not need to. The miller's cottage sits in your thoughts with a soft edge. A small chest rises there without effort. In the crofter's bed, 2 tiny fists find towels and then relax. Up the hill, a lady forgets the stair and holds only the swallow she listens for. Their rooms breathe, and your room answers. Steam warms your knuckles when you lift the lid and set it back. A little crust waits on the board and asks nothing more than teeth. You break it and taste salt and smoke. The taste is simple and true. You lean your elbows on the table and feel the wood give just enough. Ash along the iron bar loosens into soft hills that keep their glow. The rue sprig above the lintel minds its own work. It does not ward danger or invite it. It only remembers summer and keeps a sharp scent ready for boiling water. Your eyes blur at the edges and the worries in your head slow to the pace of a quiet lane. No cart speaks. No runner strikes a door with a fist. You've set your tools in reach and your cloak to dry. The night will keep for a while without you. You sit a little deeper on the bench and let your jaw loosen. Breath flows in and out without the need to shape it into numbers. The strain behind your eyes softens, and your hands lie open on your knees. Embers keep their small, red promise, and the house holds you safe. Outside, the bell on the bluff rests its tongue. Inside, the room hums with the kind of silence that heals. You've walked every corner of the day and returned. The door is latched. The bed knows your weight. Let warmth gather. Let the wheel murmur far away. Let sleep come like a slow tide and carry you without asking for anything more.